When I was young, I used to work in a company for $200 a month, and I was always confused why some people were super rich. The conventional explanation was that they worked really hard, or they had some kind of talent, or they were lucky. But I still found that all these explanations were not decisive. Let's get working hard out of the way first. This is the most common misunderstanding. Let's do some calculations. We are going to calculate the IWH, or the indicator of working hard. Don't worry, the calculations are very easy. It uses a very simple equation. The hours you work every week divided by the base number. The base number is 40 hours. So let's say you work 8 hours a day and 5 days a week. That would be 40 hours. Divided by 40, your IWH will be 1.0. This is the base IWH. If you work harder, let's say 9 hours a day and 5 days a week, your IWH will be 1.125. Now let's go nuts. If you work 12 hours a day and 5 days a week, it sounds pretty impressive, but your IWH actually is only 1.5, only 50% higher than the base IWH. Not really impressive, I have to say. If you work like that 6 days a week, your IWH will be 1.8, only 80% higher than the base IWH, not even doubled. I want to remind you what we calculated so far were transient IWH. It means we are calculating what happened only in a week. If we calculate the IWH within a longer period of time, for example over a year, and if someone's IWH is still 1.8, that will be truly impressive. But think about what that means. That means you work from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. or even 11 p.m. because we have to consider lunch break, dinner break. The commute will take at least 1 hour, you rest for 2 hours, and at last you sleep for 8 hours. You would have no time for anything else: social life, entertainment, falling in love with someone, building a family, spending time with your kids or wife or husband, learning something new, etc. And this is only part of the negative effects. The worst part is your health will be damaged. I tried once when I was working on my books. I had a job to do at the daytime to make a living, so I wrote my books at night for about 4 or 5 hours. When the pandemic began, the business went slow. I decided to finish my books as fast as I could. I worked about 12 hours a day without weekends. It was intensive 12 hours. I think my IWH remained 2.1 for at least 2 months. Then I began to feel clearly that my health was deteriorating quickly. My breath was short, my heart felt weak, and I began feeling dizzy all the time. So I had to take a break after every 7 days. I'm wondering how many people would really work like this for their entire lives, or maybe just for 5 years. I think if some people could consistently remain their IWH at 2.1 for 5 years, not only they would have no time for anything else but work, they would kill themselves. In reality, if people still have time for their social lives and family lives, their long-term IWH couldn't be higher than 1.5. Actually, 1.5 is already a crazy number. The IWH of those who claim that they work very hard usually is only something like 1.2 or 1.3. The fact is, even if you work like a robot without sleep, your maxed IWH would be 4.2. Look, I'm not trying to convince you that working hard doesn't matter. Chinese people's IWH very likely was only 1.2 or maybe 1.3, but consistently working in such a way for 40 years, it's a very different story. What I want to point out is that working hard doesn't match what you earn above the foundation. If working hard means so much, most people in this world will be super rich. But the reality is that only a teeny tiny fraction of the people in this world are super rich. Did they earn everything because they worked really hard? Considering the max IWH is only 4.2, I'm going to say no. At the best, they should have earned 4 times more than most people. So where did they get their money if they didn't work a million times harder? Talent, luck, both make more sense than working hard. But since talent is something you were born with, it's just a form of luck. So it seems that there's only one factor left on the table: luck. Everyone can work hard, but not everyone has luck. It makes some sense, but still something is missing. In my book, The Key Information, I raised the question, what makes humans so powerful? The usual answer would be intelligence, or we know how to use tools. But our ancestors had been as smart as us for at least 200,000 years, and they accomplished nothing. Civilization only began 6,000 years ago. Our ancestors split from chimpanzees at least 6 million years ago. They left the forest and entered an open world. It wasn't wise for primates. As primates, our lives completely depend on the protections from the trees. We are not equipped to live in an open world where apex predators rule. They are super fast, strong, and often they hunt in teams. All the herbivores that live in the open world possess special skills to survive. Their eyes are on both sides of their heads, so they see wider angles. They are fast and agile, so they can escape from the predators. Some of them dig holes to protect themselves, especially their children. But our ancestors possessed none of these skills. They were slow, their eyes were in front of their heads, they didn't know how to dig holes. Even if they still were capable of protecting themselves, but how they could have protected their children from the apex predators. But against all the odds, our ancestors still left the forest and ventured into the open world without turning back. Not only that, they ventured far and wide, almost reached every corner of Africa and the Eurasia continent. If you're still wondering about the intelligence, this is how our brain volume evolved. Our brain volume didn't change too much for the first 5 million years, which means we didn't become too smart. So our ancestors must have had something to help them survive. And they must have acquired it in a very short period of time. Two things: collaboration and risk-taking. These two things didn't need big changes inside the brains. Some small mutations were enough. And they didn't need a huge brain to work. Ants, bees, and termites have been collaborating and taking risks for millions of years. They work as teams. When they attack invaders, especially big predators, they take huge risks doing that. And they all have very tiny brains. Our ancestors went even further. They evolved to be the greatest risk takers on this planet. They took risks not just for defense, but for offense as well. Instead of running away from the predators, our ancestors stood up and shouted at them. Standing up straight made us look much bigger. Shouting together as a team made us more intimidating. This strange behavior could easily scare away even the most fearsome predators. Imagine you walk into a pet store. Suddenly, all the small animals begin screaming at you angrily. Aren't you going to be frightened? The benefit of taking risks is obvious. It takes a small amount of energy for a greater reward when you win. The energy consumed by standing up and shouting was minimal, compared to running away. It's extremely risky doing that against the predators, but the rewards were great. We protected ourselves and our children by consuming a tiny amount of energy. If some people were even bolder, they could scare away the predators and steal their kills. Also, greater rewards. That was the secret how our ancestors successfully survived in an open world without any conventional skills. And we evolved on this path ever since. Bravery became the most essential trait we are looking for, and the bravery is all about taking risks for greater rewards. Fast forward millions of years, today, the size of the economy and the population surpassed our ancestors' wildest dreams. The bigger population produces more risk takers. The bigger economy leads to greater temptations or greater rewards. Capitalism became the paradise for risk takers. They invested money on factories or companies so people could work together as teams and make something much more valuable than individuals could ever achieve. That's the real meaning of the Industrial Revolution. It's not just about machines, but the teamworks, large teamworks. And only risk takers are capable of initiating large teamworks. Building a factory or renting an office and opening a new company cost lots of money, millions of dollars or even more. Investing such a huge amount of money is always extremely risky. There is always a chance of a failure. The chance of a failure actually is pretty high. 20% of small companies failed within the first year, 50% within 5 years. And if the investment failed, it was always those risk takers took the responsibility, so it's not a job for everyone. But when people are lucky enough to win, they win big. That's the whole point of taking great risks. If there's no greater rewards, nobody would take the risk in the first place. Usually, the greater the risks are, the greater the rewards will be. In the game of capitalism, a bigger investment increases the possibility of immediate domination of the market, then endless profits. So money always flows to the most profitable businesses. Free market is like a fortune generator. New inventions and new services create the new needs that keep people buying. And to buy more stuff, people have to work harder. Consumerism works hand in hand with the free market and builds up a society with great wealth. We glorify those risk takers with fame. We treat them like heroes, and we worship them, like what we have been doing for millions of years. And the society doesn't have to worry that the fact that only a tiny fraction of the people have the chance to win the rewards would discourage people from taking the risks. That's our most essential and unstoppable nature after millions of years of evolution. All the losers are forgotten and disappeared completely after the last game. We only see winners. Wave after wave of people are throwing themselves into the game and hoping they will win in the end. The game never stops. When the economy is huge, like an ocean, your audacity is the only limit. This is the secret how capitalism works. This is also the reason pure socialism were or are stagnant all over the world. It suppresses risk takers by denying the greater temptation or greater rewards. Before 1980s, Chinese people were not allowed to get rich, let alone super rich. From time to time, the government was cracking down on capitalist activities. Then the government changed the policy. The country was open to capitalism. But what really happened was that all the risk takers in China were allowed to do their jobs. People were allowed to chase greater rewards. Private companies mushroomed. China began to accumulate wealth. But the most typical example, of course, is America. The American national anthem says that America is the land of the free and the home of the brave. These words concludes how America got super rich almost perfectly. America has the largest immigrant population, and almost everyone was from somewhere else, or their ancestors were. This wasn't something unique about the U.S. Many other countries in North and South America also were built by immigrants. But the U.S. was built from the very beginning by people who were seeking a place that different ideas were tolerated. And the Americans preserved this spirit for over 200 years by making the laws to make sure all the ideas are free from oppression unless the idea is condemned by the whole world, such as slavery. Americans created a land where any idea has a chance to survive, no matter how weird it is. What's interesting about the talented people or geniuses is that they are inclined to have different or unconventional ideas. America developed a culture that almost unconditionally tolerates all the ideas. Therefore, it's very natural that America is attractive to all the talented people and the geniuses. After some of them went to America, America became even more attractive to the like-minded. The snowball grew bigger and bigger. Eventually, America turned into a giant magnet that attracted all the talented people. America was also built by risk-takers ever since the beginning. Traveling across the Atlantic Ocean was dangerous back then. Only those who were willing to take the risks would do that. Starting a new life in a brand new land that was already occupied by some people was also super risky. Rebelling against the most powerful country and seeking independence was super risky. Building houses next to the hostile neighbors who owned the land before you did was super risky. Living in a city where everybody was carrying a gun was super risky. Forcing some people to abandon their 100-year-old tradition was super risky. Welcoming the people from every corner of the world and mingling with them was super risky. Taking risks for greater rewards has been an essential part of American spirit since the beginning, also the strongest motivation that drove Americans to innovate competitively. America evolved to be the center of many professions: science, technology, engineering, art, music, movies, etc. We saw an explosion of new inventions, technologies, and modern arts and music in the 20th century. If you want to prove you are the best in the world, you go to America. That place gives you the sense that you are on the top of the world. No glory could be greater than that. And again, the losers are forgotten. Only winners are remembered and become heroes, calling for more risk-takers to come. The story of America is the story of the Western world after the Renaissance. Individualism elevated geniuses. They transformed the Western world, then the whole world. Talking about the history of the Western world, it's all about the famous figures: scientists, artists, musicians, philosophers, politicians, monarchs, etc. Talented people or geniuses are all inclined to take great risks for glories. From Columbus to Van Gogh, those people were all risk-takers in different forms. By comparison, you'll notice that China was never a place for different ideas, geniuses, or risk-takers. In a way, you can even say that China is the opposite of the Western world in this aspect. The Renaissance also happened in China roughly at the same time. Literature and art also boomed. The greatest legacy is the 4 classic novels in China called 四大名著. The Dream of the Red Mansion, a story about how a rich family collapsed. The Water Margin, I mentioned this book in the previous chapters. It's a story about many vigilantes. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms, a historical drama. A Journey to the West, a fantasy about a Buddhist monk and his 3 disciples who seek their redemption. The famous Monkey King is one of the disciples. These 4 books are famous in China and had a great impact on Chinese culture. But you might be surprised that the authors of all 4 books are still not entirely clear today. Some experts are still trying to find out who really wrote these 4 books. I think one of the reasons is that Chinese culture didn't really elevate geniuses and new ideas, let alone glorifying them. Instead, they were more likely to be treated like troublemakers who would intensify the ocean effect, which the Chinese culture has been trying to contain for thousands of years. Individualism never had a chance to set root in Chinese culture. The Chinese Renaissance died out quickly. There were no more famous novels in China after these 4 books. As I mentioned, China has always been a top player in the world for thousands of years consistently. It fell during the transition of the dynasties, but it always bounced back to the top after the country was unified. This consistency is a great chance to explore another aspect of how our society really works. China must have been doing something right that lifted this giant country to the top. The key reason of China's rise still lies somewhere else, and that will be the topic for the last chapter of this video series.